This story was sent in by someone who claims it is true. Whether you believe it or not, that is up to you. Have you ever wondered what happens when someone tries to capture a moment at the final resting place of the King of Pop? What you're about to hear will make you think twice before taking that next selfie at a cemetery. Before we sink into the darkness of this true horror story, don't forget to subscribe. These stories aren't just rare, they're unforgettable, and the next one might just be your worst nightmare. This is the terrifying true story of Marcus Rivera, a 24-year-old Michael Jackson superfan who visited Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California, on what should have been just another pilgrimage to honor his idol. But what Marcus discovered in that single photograph would haunt him for the rest of his life, and change everything he thought he knew about the boundary between our world and whatever lies beyond. Marcus had been obsessed with Michael Jackson since childhood. His bedroom walls were covered with posters, his phone was filled with every song the King of Pop ever recorded, and he knew every dance move from Thriller by heart. When he finally saved enough money for a trip to Los Angeles, visiting Michael's grave at Forest Lawn was at the top of his list. He'd planned this moment for years, imagining himself standing there, paying his respects to the man who had shaped his entire musical identity. The day was overcast and unusually quiet. For a Saturday afternoon in September, Marcus arrived at Forest Lawn around 3 in the afternoon, his heart racing with anticipation and a strange nervousness he couldn't quite explain. The cemetery felt different than he'd expected. Instead of the peaceful, serene atmosphere he'd imagined, there was something almost oppressive about the place. The air seemed thick, heavy with an energy that made the hair on his arms stand up. As Marcus walked through the meticulously maintained grounds, following the path he'd memorized from countless online guides, he noticed how few other visitors were around. The silence was broken only by the distant sound of groundskeepers and the occasional rustle of leaves in the ancient oak trees that dotted the landscape. With each step closer to the great mausoleum, where Michael Jackson's crypt was located, the strange feeling in the air seemed to intensify. When Marcus finally reached the Holly Terrace section of the great mausoleum, he stood for several minutes, just staring at the simple bronze plaque that marked the final resting place of his hero. The inscription was elegant and understated, nothing like the elaborate monuments you might expect for someone of Michael's stature. Marcus felt a wave of emotion wash over him as he realized he was actually standing there, in the presence of greatness, even in death. After spending nearly an hour in quiet contemplation, reading the messages left by other fans, and reflecting on Michael's incredible legacy, Marcus decided he wanted to capture this moment. He debated whether it was appropriate to take a photo at someone's grave, but ultimately decided that a simple selfie would be a meaningful way to commemorate this pilgrimage. He wanted something to remember this day by, something to show his friends back home that he'd actually made it to this sacred place. Marcus pulled out his phone and positioned himself carefully in front of the crypt. He wanted to be respectful, not making any silly faces or inappropriate gestures. This was a solemn moment, and he wanted the photo to reflect that gravity. He held up his phone, angled it to capture both himself and the bronze plaque behind him, and took several quick shots. The lighting wasn't perfect due to the overcast sky, but he figured he could adjust that later with filters. Satisfied with his photos, Marcus spent another few minutes at the gravesite, whispering a quiet thank you to Michael for all the joy his music had brought to the world. As he prepared to leave, Marcus decided to scroll through the selfies he'd just taken, wanting to pick the best one to post on his social media accounts. He'd been planning the caption for weeks, something heartfelt about dreams, inspiration, and the power of music to transcend death itself. But as Marcus looked at the first photo on his phone screen, his blood turned ice cold. There, clearly visible in the background behind him, was the unmistakable silhouette of a person. Not just any person, but someone who seemed to be wearing a distinctive fedora hat and what looked like a sequin jacket that caught the dim light filtering through the mausoleum windows. The figure appeared to be standing just behind and to the left of Marcus, close enough that they should have been impossible to miss. Marcus's hands began to shake as he stared at the image. He had been completely alone when he took that selfie. Absolutely, unquestionably alone. He'd spent over an hour in that space, and hadn't seen another soul in the entire Holly Terrace section. The figure in the photo wasn't transparent or ghostly looking like you might expect from some supernatural encounter. Instead, it appeared solid, real, as if an actual person had been standing right there with him. With trembling fingers, Marcus swiped to the next photo. The mysterious figure was there again, but this time, it seemed to have moved slightly closer. In the third photo, the person appeared to be looking directly at the camera, though their face remained obscured by shadows and the brim of the fedora. By the fourth and final selfie, the figure seemed to be reaching out toward Marcus, one gloved hand extended in what could have been interpreted as either a gesture of blessing or something far more sinister. Marcus immediately looked around the mausoleum, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it echoing off the marble walls. He was still completely alone. There was no one else in sight, no place anyone could have hidden. No way someone could have been standing behind him during those photos, and then vanished without a trace. The logical part of his mind tried to rationalize what he was seeing. Maybe it was a trick of light and shadow, some kind of optical illusion, created by the architecture of the mausoleum and the strange lighting conditions. But as Marcus examined the photos more closely, zooming in on the mysterious figure, he began to notice details that made his stomach drop. The person in the image wasn't just wearing any fedora and sequin jacket. They were wearing the exact outfit Michael Jackson had been famous for during his bad era, complete with the distinctive black fedora tilted at that characteristic angle, and the iconic military-style jacket covered in sequins and metallic details. Even more disturbing was the figure's posture and stance. It wasn't the casual positioning of some random person who happened to wander into the frame. Instead, the mysterious person was posed in what appeared to be one of Michael's signature dance positions, with one foot slightly forward, and their body angled in that smooth, effortless way that had made the King of Pop's movements so instantly recognizable. Marcus tried to convince himself that this had to be some kind of elaborate prank or coincidence. Maybe another Michael Jackson fan had been visiting the grave and had somehow managed to slip into his photos without him noticing. Maybe someone was playing an incredibly sophisticated practical joke, using some kind of advanced photo editing technology to insert a figure into his selfies in real time. But as he stood there in the silence of the mausoleum, these explanations felt increasingly hollow and desperate. The young man decided to take another selfie, this time being extra careful to look all around him before and after pressing the shutter button. He turned in a complete circle, scanning every corner of the Holly Terrace section, checking behind every column and architectural feature that could possibly conceal a person. He was absolutely definitively alone. With his heart still racing, Marcus raised his phone again and took a single, carefully composed selfie. When he looked at this new photo, Marcus nearly dropped his phone. The figure was there again, but this time it was even clearer, even more detailed. The mysterious person appeared to be standing directly beside Marcus now, close enough that their shoulders should have been touching. The sequin jacket was unmistakably visible, every detail sharp and clear despite the dim lighting. Most unsettling of all, while the figure's face remained partially obscured by the fedora's brim, Marcus could now make out what appeared to be a slight smile, the kind of mysterious, knowing expression that Michael Jackson had been famous for in his photographs and music videos. Panic began to set in as Marcus realized that whatever was happening was completely beyond his understanding or control. He wasn't dealing with some elaborate hoax or technical glitch with his phone's camera. Something genuinely supernatural was occurring, and he was the only witness to it. The rational part of his mind that had always been skeptical of ghost stories and paranormal encounters was crumbling under the weight of what he was experiencing firsthand. Marcus decided he needed to leave immediately, as much as he had dreamed of this visit to Michael's grave. As much as it meant to him as a lifelong fan, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was intruding on something sacred and potentially dangerous. He quickly gathered his belongings and began walking toward the exit of the great mausoleum, his footsteps echoing eerily in the marble corridors. But as Marcus hurried through the building, he couldn't escape the sensation that he was being followed. Every few steps, he would hear what sounded like another set of footsteps behind him, matching his pace perfectly. When he would stop to listen, the sounds would cease immediately. When he would resume walking, they would begin again after just a moment's delay. The echo effect of the mausoleum's architecture made it impossible to pinpoint exactly where these phantom footsteps were coming from, but they seemed to be getting closer with each passing minute. By the time Marcus reached the exit of the great mausoleum, he was practically running. The overcast day that had seemed merely gloomy when he arrived now felt ominous and threatening. The shadows cast by the ancient oak trees seemed darker and more menacing, and every rustling leaf sounded like whispered voices he couldn't quite understand. Marcus didn't stop moving until he reached his rental car in the parking lot, and even then, he sat for several minutes with the doors locked before he felt safe enough to start the engine. During the drive back to his hotel, Marcus tried to process what had just happened. He was a rational, educated person who had never believed in ghosts or supernatural phenomena. He had always assumed that people who claimed to have paranormal experiences were either lying, delusional, or misinterpreting perfectly normal events. But now he had photographic evidence of something that defied every logical explanation he could think of. Back in his hotel room, Marcus spent hours examining the photos on his phone, zooming in on every detail, trying to find some rational explanation for what he was seeing. He downloaded photo analysis apps, searched online for information about camera malfunctions that might create human-like figures in photographs, and even considered the possibility that his phone had been hacked by someone with incredibly sophisticated image manipulation software. But every technical explanation he explored led to dead ends. The metadata on the photos showed they had been taken with his phone's camera at the exact times and locations he remembered. There were no signs of digital manipulation or editing. The lighting and shadows in the images were consistent with the actual conditions in the mausoleum. Most convincingly, the mysterious figure appeared to interact naturally with the environment, casting appropriate shadows and reflecting light in ways that would be nearly impossible to fake, especially in real time. As the evening wore on, Marcus began to research other people's experiences at Michael Jackson's grave. What he discovered made his blood run cold all over again, hidden in obscure forums and buried in the comments sections of blog posts. He found dozens of similar accounts from other visitors to Forest Lawn. People reported seeing unexplained figures in their photos, hearing phantom music playing near the gravesite, and experiencing the same sensation of being followed through the mausoleum corridors. One account particularly struck Marcus as eerily similar to his own experience. A woman from Chicago described taking selfies at Michael's grave, and later discovering a mysterious figure in a sequin jacket standing behind her in the photos. Like Marcus, she had been completely alone when the pictures were taken, and like Marcus, she had initially tried to rationalize the experience before eventually accepting that she had encountered something beyond normal understanding. Another visitor reported hearing what sounded like soft humming near the gravesite, a melody that seemed familiar but couldn't quite be identified. When this person tried to record the sound on their phone, the audio file contained only silence, but when they listened to the recording through headphones, they could swear they heard faint traces of someone singing in a voice that sounded remarkably like Michael Jackson himself. Reading these accounts, Marcus realized that his experience was part of a larger pattern of unexplained phenomena surrounding Michael Jackson's final resting place. It seemed that the King of Pop's presence was still felt by those who came to pay their respects, manifesting in ways that science couldn't explain, but that were undeniably real to those who experienced them. The more Marcus researched, the more he began to understand that his encounter might not have been threatening or malevolent at all. Many of the accounts he read described a sense of peace and blessing associated with these supernatural experiences. People reported feeling comforted by the presence they encountered, as if Michael's spirit was acknowledging their devotion and thanking them for keeping his memory alive. This interpretation put Marcus's photos in an entirely new light. Instead of being frightened by the mysterious figure, he began to see it as a profound gift. The smile he had noticed in the clearest photo no longer seemed sinister, but rather gentle and welcoming. The outstretched hand in the final selfie wasn't reaching out to grab him, but perhaps to offer a blessing or acknowledgement of his lifelong dedication to Michael's music and legacy. Marcus spent the rest of his trip to Los Angeles with a completely transformed perspective on what had happened at Forest Lawn. Instead of being traumatized by the experience, he began to feel honored that he had been chosen to witness something so extraordinary. Not everyone who visited Michael's grave had these encounters, which made Marcus feel like he had been specially selected for this supernatural interaction. When Marcus returned home, he struggled with whether to share his photos and experience with others. He knew that most people would be skeptical, that they would demand scientific explanations he couldn't provide, or that they would dismiss his account as an elaborate hoax or the product of an overactive imagination. But he also felt a responsibility to document what had happened, to add his voice to the growing collection of testimonies from people who had experienced the unexplained at Michael Jackson's grave. Eventually, Marcus decided to share his story and photos on a forum dedicated to paranormal experiences. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of people replied to his post, many sharing their own similar encounters at celebrity grave sites around the world. Some offered technical explanations for the photos, but others recognized the experience for what it truly was, a genuine encounter with something beyond the physical world. The photos Marcus took that day at Forest Lawn remain some of the clearest and most compelling evidence ever captured of supernatural activity at a celebrity grave site. Photography experts who have examined the images have been unable to explain how the mysterious figure could have appeared so clearly and consistently across multiple photos without being visible to the naked eye when the pictures were taken. Today, Marcus looks back on his visit to Michael Jackson's grave as one of the most profound and meaningful experiences of his life. What began as a simple pilgrimage to honor his musical hero became an encounter with the mysterious forces that govern the boundary between life and death. The photos serve as a permanent reminder that there are aspects of existence that science cannot fully explain, and that the connections we form with those who inspire us may transcend even death itself. For Marcus, the experience has deepened rather than diminished his appreciation for Michael Jackson's legacy. Knowing that some essence of the King of Pop may still be present at his final resting place makes Marcus feel even more connected to the artist who shaped his love of music. The photos have become treasured possessions, proof that some bonds are strong enough to survive even the ultimate separation of death. So the next time you visit the grave of someone who touched your life, remember Marcus's story. Pay attention to the photos you take, because you never know who might be standing beside you, ready to make their presence known to those who truly believe in the power of human connection to transcend the boundaries of the physical world. That was just one of many. If you think that was disturbing, wait till you hear what I've got next. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the shadows.